Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Trollheim with your host, Rabbi Anibal. And great to see so many of you saying hello in the chat. It's always nice. And by the way, I sound a little different today. I'm under the weather. It's not COVID. It's not like you should be afraid because you're on the other side of the screen, right? But I haven't been this sick in a long time. And I realized that one of the beauties of this online learning is I can still teach without putting anybody at risk. But I may have to clean my nose and cough here and there. You know how it works. I'm pretty sure you guys been sick before. Feelings, how would you say, people sick like a dog? It's not like I know how dogs get sick because I don't have a dog, but I guess, I don't know where that expression is coming from. So, who else is here? Let's see. Let's go from the beginning. Karin Farkas is here. She was the first one, even before I went live. I saw her name popping up in my chat. Priscilla Kerr is here. Welcome. Caroline Louise Smith. She connected on Facebook, and I guess she changed her mind and came back on YouTube. But welcome, Caroline. Shelley Chochinov is here. Brenda and David Grossman. Andrea Arroyave. Judy Chirac. Amparo Goldman. Randy Lodinger. Harvey Garfinkel. Welcome, guys. Welcome all. So today we are going to study about the special maftir that we have in this weekend. It's called Parshat HaChodesh. And it's always the prelude to the month of Nisan. So whatever is the Shabbat before the first of Nisan, the first of the month of Nisan, we have to take an extra Sefer Torah, an extra scroll from the Ark, and to read a special text. And we are going to see in a minute why this is so important. Thank you, Brenda. I'm hoping to feel better too. I thought it was just a little bit of a mild cold, and I was hoping to feel better today. No, it didn't happen. I started to cough and things, but anyway. So, Shabbat HaChodesh is going to be the main thing. We are going to open the class with that. And immediately after, we are going to start with the beginning of Parshat Vayakel. Which, by the way, I don't know if you realize the word Vayakel comes from the same root of the word Kehillah, congregation. Why? Because the Parsha will start saying that Moses congregated the people of Israel to teach them about the Shabbat and all the details of the tabernacle. Okay? And we are also going to explore why the two topics are presented back to back, which is very unusual. The fact that Moses mixed up the teachings about the Shabbat, which is actually a reminder of the laws of Shabbat, because the laws of Shabbat were already revealed, a reminder of the laws of Shabbat right before the instructions to build the tabernacle. So keep that in mind. That's going to be the second half of the class. Okay? So welcome everyone again. And remember, if you miss anything about this class, don't worry. It's going to be rebroadcast tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. Okay? So, don't worry. Let's begin. Let me remove the QR code because it's on the way. Hide. Very good. So, let's start studying about Shabbat HaChodesh. Okay? And then let's explain what it is, and then we're going to go more in details. Shabbat HaChodesh, or the Sabbath of the month. Shabbat is the Sabbath. Chodesh is month in Hebrew. So the Sabbath of the month. But the should be with capital T. Why? You'll see. Shabbat HaChodesh precedes the first of the Hebrew month of Nisan, during which Passover is celebrated. The Torah reading is taken from Exodus 12, verses 1 to 20. There we learn that on the first day of Nisan, God presented the first commandment of how to sanctify the new moon. REBROADCAST, for the onset of Rosh Chodesh, and thus Nisan becomes the first month of the Jewish year, right, according to the Torah. Then the rabbis changed that. But so the first mitzvah, the first commandment given to the people of Israel by God was the mitzvah of creating a calendar. It's interesting because this, you see, let me present this. Prior to leaving Egypt, God introduced the first mitzvot commanded on a national scale, the sanctification of Rosh Chodesh, and the mitzvot related to the Pesach sacrifice. And these commandments were revealed before Mount Sinai. You see, we usually believe that the commandments were given at Mount Sinai, and that was the first revelation of God to the people of Israel. Wrong. The first revelation from God to the entire nation of Israel, in this case through Moses, were these two mitzvot. Number one, the Rosh Chodesh, but basically the rabbis understand that in order to have Rosh Chodesh, you need to have a calendar. Otherwise, if you don't have a calendar, the months don't make any sense. So, mitzvah number one is to have a calendar. And that was given even before the Torah presents all the commandments about the Passover. Specifically the Passover, the Pesach sacrifice, how to sacrifice the lamb, how to be eaten, and so forth. Okay? So again, this is just to make it clear for all of you that there were commandments revealed before the big revelation at Mount Sinai. This is a perfect example. So, it's interesting to me that the very first commandment given to the people of Israel is to have a calendar. But at the end of the day, it makes sense. If you think about it, it makes sense. Because now they have to be responsible for their own time. When you're a slave, you are not responsible for your own time. What you think about time is irrelevant. You do what you are told. Doesn't really matter if you believe that you should have a day of rest or you should have a holiday, or it doesn't matter. Because somebody else will impose on you how you are going to use your time. But when you are free, you have the obligation, actually more than an obligation, I would say, is a responsibility to be responsible with the time. And that's why the first mitzvah as a free people, as a free nation, is to create the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar, according to the Torah, is different to the Jewish calendar we have right now. For example, you're going to see that all the months in the Torah they don't have names. They have numbers. Okay? So, month number 1 eventually became the month of Nisan, but it's rabbinic. The name Nisan is rabbinic. The Torah, this is the first month, and it's known as the first month. That's it. Okay? So I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you remembering how the Jewish calendar is made. What you should expect in a Jewish calendar. So let's do a quick recap of the Jewish calendar, okay? So, number 1, remember that the Jewish calendar is a lunisolar calendar. Remember that word, lunisolar. Luni is moon, solar is sun. So it's a combination of the sun and the moon. What I mean? Cycles of the moon and rotation of the earth around the sun. Okay, it's a combination of both. So, in other words, it's a fixed lunar year based on 12 lunar months of 29 or 30 days with an intercalary lunar month added 7 times every 19 years or once every 2 to 3 years to synchronize the 12 lunar cycles with a slightly longer solar year. Okay, so that's why the Jewish calendar sometimes will have 12 months, but every 2 or 3 years it will have 13 months. Although originally the new lunar crescent had to be observed and certified by witnesses and announced publicly, the moment of the new moon is now calculated arithmetically. So, in other words, there is an app for that. We don't have to go out and look at the sky to know when we have to start the new Jewish month. We can create calendars with computers. So the system to do it changed. Okay? That's what it means. That's what it means. So, now the month, again, remember I told you that in the Bible, they have numbers, but the rabbis changed that. And they assigned names to each one of the biblical months. So the names that we use in these days are month number 1, the first month is called Nisan and always has 30 days. Then you have Iyar, always 29 days. Sivan, always 30 days. Tammuz, always 29 days. Av, always 30 days. Elul, always 29 days. Tishrei, always 30 days. Cheshvan, sometimes 29, sometimes 30 days. Depends on the need to keep the calendars in sync. Remember, because sometimes we have to be sure that certain holidays don't fall on Shabbat and so forth. So the rabbis allow that extra day or less day just to be sure that that will never happen. Okay? So that's happened on Cheshvan. And then also on Kislev, that could have 29 or 30 days. Tevet, always 29 days. Shevat, always 30 days. And Adar, always 29 days. But in the leap years, an additional month, Adar 1, with 30 days, is added after Shevat, and the regular Adar is referred to as Adar 2, with 29 days. Okay? And Adar is interesting because it's the month of Purim. And that's why this is kind of a famous month. So sometimes we have to be careful because Purim is not celebrated on Adar 1, but on Adar 2. And I believe the reason why the rabbis did this is just to be sure that Pesach is always 1 month after Purim and not 2 months after Purim. That's why. It has a practical reason. Okay? So the Bible designates Nisan as the first month of the year, but modern practice follows the scheme described in the Talmud. Nisan is the new year for the reigns of kings and the festivals. But Rosh Hashanah, which means the head of the year and is celebrated in the month of Tishrei, is the new year for the counting of years. Okay, so basically the first of Tishrei is when the year changes number. So now we are in the year 5783. Next first of Tishrei is going to be 5784. But for the sake of counting the festivals or calculating the festivals, or also for counting how many years, right, the king was in the throne, we don't count that anymore. We still use Nisan as the first month of the year. Okay? So Tishrei as a new year is very important because this is when the numbered year changes, which is most significant for determining the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, and the Yovel, the Jubilee years. Okay, so both new years are very important for the tradition. There is another one that you may be familiar, which is Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of the month of Shevat, which is the new year for the trees. It's another new year mentioned in the Talmud, anyway, for you to have into consideration. But for practical things, we need to know at least the two main New Years, which is first of Nisan, and is mentioned in this week's Parsha, in Parshat HaChodesh, in the Maftir. We are going to read that in the synagogues. And we also remember the first of Tishrei, because that's Rosh Hashanah. So those are the important ones. Okay? Now, a little bit more about the calendar. The Jewish day, okay? The Jewish day is of no fixed length. The Jewish day is modeled on the reference to there was evening, there was morning in the creation account in the first chapter of Genesis. Accordingly, it runs from sunset, start of the evening, to the next sunset. Okay? That's one day. So the day doesn't start at midnight. The day starts as soon as it's dark in Judaism. And that's the way we count days. And it's always complicated because, for example, and these are practical things. Let's say that you want to get married and the marriage is in the evening and it's already dark. So whoever is officiating at the time of writing the ketubah, you have to be careful that the Hebrew day is the next day in the calendar. Same happens, for example, when somebody dies and you have to calculate the yortzeit. Where the first question that the funeral director will ask you is if the person died during the day or in the evening, because that will change which Hebrew date is going to be used for a yortzeit. So those things are very important. So we always have to remember that the Hebrew day follows the creation of the world. That it was evening and that it was morning. So the day starts in the evening. So the first religious service of the day is not the morning service, it's the evening service. Very interesting. Let's continue. Many of these times, and now that's the day itself, but the hours of the day, we also have a funny way of calculating hours in Judaism. Many of these times are dependent on the Sha'ah Zemanit, the proportional hour, special unit of time that takes into account variation in the length of the day. The hour has special meaning in Jewish law. When we say that a certain mitzvah may be performed 3 hours into the day, this doesn't mean at 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock or 3 hours after sunrise. Okay, careful with that. The Sha'ah Zmanit is defined by dividing by 12 the interval between the sunrise and the sunset. So in other words, you take all the hours, all the day hours of a day, and you divide it by 12. And every segment is called a Jewish hour, or the Sha'ah Zemanit, which means time hour. So, for example, let me give you an example. Using this method, if sunrise is at 5 a.m., sunset is at 7:30 p.m., we have 14.5 clock hours, or 870 minutes of light. Then, dividing this number by 12 produces the value for the Sha'ah Zmanit for that specific day, which is 72.5 minutes. And this is interesting because it changes every day. So if you want to be careful into certain prayers to be said at a specific time, for example, you want to say the morning service when it's appropriate to do it in the morning, and it will. If you read the Jewish law, it will tell you how many hours into the day you are allowed to do the morning service. But it's no hours of 60 minutes. It's based on the Sha'ah Zmanit, so you need some kind of app to tell you how to calculate the hour for that day. Okay? We like to complicate things. But hey, I didn't write it. I just inherited it. Okay, and lastly, the weeks. The weeks. The Hebrew calendar follows a 7-day weekly cycle, which runs concurrently but independently of the civil calendar. The names of the days of the week are simply the day number within the week. Back to name, the same way the Torah names the month, it also names the days. So you have Yom Rishon. Yom means day in Hebrew. Rishon means first. So first day is Sunday. That's the first day of the week, Sunday. Hey, Randy, I remember this. It took me a while, but I remember this. Okay. Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, which is Monday, Yom Shlishi, Tuesday, Yom Revi'i, Wednesday, Yom Hamishi, Thursday, Yom Shishi, Friday, and the only one that has a name, and not a number, is Shabbat, the Sabbath, okay, Saturday, the Sabbath. And the names of the days of the week are modeled on the 7 days mentioned in the creation story. Okay, Randy, sorry if it's complicated. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about the month, okay, and about the calendar, Now let's go to the parsha. Let's go back to this week parsha. Okay, that was about Shabbat HaChodesh, about the calendar, and a little bit about how we created the calendar to fulfill with God's commandment of creating a calendar, which is exactly what we're going to read this weekend. So I wanted all of you to be aware of what happened after Moses commanded the Jewish people to create a calendar. I just thought it. And yes, it's a little bit complicated, but that's Jewish life. Okay, let's go now to Parshat Vayakel. Vayakel. And remember, the word Vayakel, congregated, is the same root of the word Kehillah, congregation, that we use in these days to refer to our synagogues. Okay? So congregation Shaarei Tzedek, for example, is Kehillat Shaarei Tzedek. Actually, it's called in Hebrew. I read it once in one of the stones in the building. In Hebrew, they call it Kehillat Kodesh Shaarei Tzedek, which means holy congregation Shaarei Tzedek. In English, we don't say holy congregation, but in Hebrew, it is Kehillat Kodesh Shaarei Tzedek. What about that? Even many of our members, they don't know that. And in Hebrew, it's Kehillat Kodesh Shaarei Tzedek. Okay, so let me read for you what it says at the very beginning, in the opening verses of the Parsha. Okay, actually, it should be Exodus 1, 2, 3. My mistake. It says, Moses then congregated, let's use that word, the whole Israelite community and said to them, these are the things that God has commanded you to do. Okay, and it says these in plural because now Moses is going to start teaching them a few commandments. The first one is a reminder. Even before the calendar, it's a reminder. On 6 days, melacha may be done. Melacha is work, but I didn't want to use the word work just on purpose because the Torah uses a very specific word for work when it's talking about Shabbat. And that word is melacha. So I don't want to translate it. I want you all to start using the word melacha when you are talking about not working or working on Shabbat. Okay? Because it's not that you are not allowed to work on Shabbat. Shabbat, you're not allowed to do melacha. Keep that in mind. So, on 6 days, melacha may be done. But on the 7th day, you shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to God. Whoever does any melacha on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on the Sabbath day. So, this is interesting because the Torah says, is presenting here what kind of work is forbidden on Shabbat. And just to make it clear, it adds immediately after, on top of all the prohibited things of melacha, you also have to avoid lighting any fire. And why is it so important? Because eventually the Torah will say that it was allowed, and actually was mandated, to light fires in the temple on Shabbat. So, to avoid any confusion, it said, yeah, in the temple you can do it, but now that Moses is talking to the people of Israel that they are living outside the temple, he said, but you are not allowed. You say, we can do it in the temple, but you are not allowed to kindle any fire on Shabbat. So, basically here is teaching the two things. On Shabbat, no melacha, plus no fire. And there is one more thing here, which sometimes we don't pay attention to it. We said, Sheshet Yamin Ta'aseh Melacha. I said, on 6 days, you have to do, here, I know the translation said, Melacha may be done, but basically what it said is, you should do all the Melacha on the 6 days. So it's almost saying, yeah, you should rest on Shabbat, but work on the other 6, right? It's an interesting kind of subliminal message there. Subliminal message that is important for us to work. But now the Midrash will take this, the fact that Moses first congregated the people of Israel. So he, again, because the Torah is using the word Vayakel, congregated, like a congregation, right? And immediately after the word congregation is used, Moses is teaching the laws of Shabbat. So the Midrash will explain something very interesting. The Midrash will say, this teaches us that Moses instituted the practice of assembling on Shabbat to listen to the reading of the Torah. It's just because of I think the word is juxtaposition of the word congregation with the word Shabbat. So the Midrash say that there is a hidden message here, and that is that Moses instituted the practice of assembling congregation, right? On Shabbat to listen to the reading of the Torah. And this is, according to the Midrash, how come we read the Torah every Shabbat. Isn't that amazing? Now, we all know that we read the Torah not only on Shabbat, but we also read the Torah during the weekdays, and that seems to be with the fact that Monday and Thursday morning were market days where people will get together anyway. So it was a tradition to have a very, very short reading, just because people were there. On Shabbat, people will come to you, to the temple, to the synagogue. But Mondays and Thursdays is almost like the rabbis have to go to the people to share a little bit of Torah with them where they were. And that was in the market. And the market days were Mondays and Thursdays. It's not that I can prove that, but that's the way the rabbis are presenting it. Now, as I say, the Torah is read not just on Saturday, but also weekdays and other occasions. And how many readings we do, how many readings we have, will change, depends on the occasion. So let me share with you how it works, okay? So, the weekly parasha is, the weekly parasha is the portion of the Torah read each week. So we call it parasha, okay? This weekly division ensures that the entire Torah is read by the end of the year. So remember, we have to finish the Torah every year for Simchat Torah. So to be sure that we can do that, the rabbis pre-assigned a portion to every weekend, to every Shabbat. The Torah was divided into 54 portions because that is the maximum number of Shabbatot or Saturdays that you can have in a leap year. Okay, when we add the extra month. So that's why we have to do that. If the year is shorter, some of the parshiot, which is the plural of parasha, are going to be combined. That's the way we do it. So each parasha is named after the first meaningful word in the Torah portion. We also read Torah on Shabbat afternoon and on Monday and Thursday morning, all from the same parasha designated for that week. So in other words, the very first time that we read a parasha, a new parasha, it will be on the Shabbat afternoon. And so basically, this weekend in the synagogues, this coming Shabbat, we're going to read Vayakel-Pekudei, which is one of the cases. Remember, I told you sometimes we have to combine two parshiot because the year is shorter. This is a perfect example. This weekend we are combining the parsha Vayakel and parsha Pekudei together. So we combine both. And we read it on Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon, we're already reading next week parasha. And that is, if I'm not mistaken, Leviticus. I want to be sure that I'm not wrong. I'm pretty sure it's Leviticus. Yeah, Leviticus, Vaikra for next week. So Saturday afternoon, we're already reading Leviticus. Okay? So, but let's continue here. For special days of the Jewish calendar, how many readings we have goes in order of importance, from lower to higher. Okay, so weekdays, I already told you 3, because that's weekdays, is nothing special. Then we have Hanukkah, which, why would I say that is the lowest? Because Hanukkah is rabbinic, it's not from the Torah, it's at a different level. So that's why we read only 3 aliyot for Hanukkah. Then on Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed, that they are considered half holidays, we have 4 readings. One extra one. On Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuot. Why do I have Sukkot twice? That's interesting. Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, we have 5 readings. On Yom Kippur morning, we have 6 readings. Okay? And on Shabbat, when Yom Kippur or festival occurs on Shabbat, we always have 7 readings. Okay? So Shabbat always takes precedence. And it's interesting that in this list, Shabbat's holiness is higher than Yom Kippur. I don't know if you noticed that. Because for us, when somebody asks you, what is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar? The right answer is not Yom Kippur. The right answer is Shabbat. And then after Shabbat, the second last in holiness is Yom Kippur. Okay? Never forget that. Shabbat comes always before. So, now, let's go back to this text, and I wanted to show you something. Let's start talking about the concept of melacha. Okay? And I'm going back to this text. On 6 days, melacha must be done. But on the 7th day, you shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to God. Whoever does any melacha on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire through other settlements on the Sabbath day. And you have to remember, the Torah uses the term melacha to denote the kind of activity forbidden on Shabbat. That means that there are many things that you may consider work, but it might be permitted on Shabbat. One thing is sometimes moving things within your house. Sometimes could be heavy things that you may think that it constitutes work, but it may be permitted on Shabbat because it's not melacha. So the word melacha is a very specific type of work. Now, Karen Farkas, did they actually put people to death for this? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. I will highlight your question here because it's very important. And there is an example in the Torah. Somebody who was caught chopping wood on Shabbat. And it was brought to Moses and said, what should we do? And Moses said, the person was put to death by stoning. Yeah, we had that. So then eventually it stopped happening because the law changes in the application of the law. But I think the Torah tried to explain how bad it is, the desecration of Shabbat. That is the holiest day of the year. And it happens every year. So they took it very seriously. Yeah, I know it sounds extreme, but hey, I cannot change what is in the Torah. Okay, so now what I wanted to explain to all of you is how do we understand what melacha is? It says that melacha, as I mentioned, is some kind of work. But how do we know specifically what kind of work we are talking about? And the rabbis again learned what kind of work we're talking about, but using the rule of the juxtaposition. In the sense that, remember, before we learned about the reading of the Torah on Shabbat, because the juxtaposition, the two sections together between Moses congregating the people and then talking about Shabbat, okay, the same is going to happen here to learn what melacha is. Why? Let me bring it to you. the rabbis explain that the work involved in setting up the tabernacle was described as melechet, same root of melacha, machshevet. So, and it goes like this. Moses said to the children of Israel, behold, God has called by name Bezalel ben Uri from the tribe of Yehudah, and he has filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, to enable him to do all types of melacha. And also to create plans to work in gold, silver, and brass, and to cut stone for setting and for carpentry, and to do all types of melechet machshevet. Melechet machshevet is to do all kind of skilled work, okay? But what happened is, if you go back to the Parsha at the beginning, the first 3 verses is Moses congregating the people. The next 2 verses are Moses repeating then the laws of Shabbat and not the avoidance of fire. And immediately after, start talking about things that they were done for the tabernacle. Immediately after. Verse 4 already starts with things related to the tabernacle. So, what the rabbis understood, and I will go back here, is that the juxtaposition of the topic of Shabbat and the description of things about the tabernacle, especially considering that the work that it was necessary to build the tabernacle was called melacha. So the rabbis decided that every task or every procedure that it was necessary to do to build the tabernacle becomes something that is automatically forbidden on Shabbat, because that becomes melacha. And that's how the rabbis figure out what melacha is. In other words, everything that it was done to build the tabernacle was melacha. It was a very specific type of work. Now, interestingly enough, you will see that the term melacha is also used in the account of the creation of the world. Look at this. Back to Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3, we read, and the heavens and the earth and all their hosts were completed, and God finished all the melacha that he had done on the 7th day, and he rested on the 7th day from all his melacha that he had done. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, for he rested on the Sabbath from all his melacha that God created in order to do. So, in other words, I know the rabbis created a list, and I want to share with you in a minute. The rabbis created a list on everything that constitutes melacha, practical things that we should learn to avoid. But in general terms, when we combine the narrative of the tabernacle with the narrative of the creation of the world and what God did, then we realize that in general words, melacha is creative work. Everything that is creative work is melacha. And then the list that the rabbis present is just a detail for us to better understand the concept and to have something concrete. Because if you just leave it to you are not allowed to do any kind of creative work, then it may become wishy-washy, right? That you may disagree with me what constitutes creative work. So the rabbis ended up formalizing a list of things that they are forbidden on Shabbat. Any questions? If you have any questions, I would like to know. Remember, the chat is open. Okay, so the rabbis in the Talmud, they figured out, and we don't know why. We are talking about now oral law, right? According to oral law, we have 39 actions that they are melacha. Why 39? We don't know. But even before the rabbis start, they have to go to the Torah to try to find within verses 39 things that they were done to build the tabernacle. They had the number 39 that came to them through oral law. You know where else we have something similar? With the 613 mitzvot. You may have heard that in Judaism we have 613 commandments, but where is that coming from? It's coming through oral law. The rabbis had the names 613, and after that, they have to go to the Torah and to find those 613 commandments. That's why it depends who writes the list. It might be slightly different. There are different attempts to find the 613 commandments from the Torah, and depends who wrote it. Because first we have the number 613, and then the rabbis have to figure out which one were the 613 commandments. Same happened with the 39 melachot. Melachot, plural of melacha. They had the number 39 through oral law, and then they had to figure out which one were the 39 tasks. And that's why you will see that, interestingly, when they go through the things necessary to do the tabernacle, they include some of them, but they don't include others. And they have to kind of explain themselves, saying, well, that is a subcategory of the other. But why didn't you use the same logic with... They needed to come up with 39 tasks because they had the number 39 through oral law. Karen Farkas, you said, wouldn't learned discussion of Jewish teaching often lead to creation of new ideas? Yeah, but we are talking about material things, only things that you can touch. So creation of ideas is not forbidden on Shabbat, okay? That's why, for example, using money or financial transactions are forbidden on Shabbat, but you can pledge orally tzedakah on Shabbat without that constituting a violation of the prohibition of doing finances on Shabbat, because you're not really doing, you are pledging and promising for the future. It's very interesting, very interesting. So let's talk about the 39 melachot, and again, take it with a grain of salt, because we have 39 thanks to the fact that the rabbis had the number 39 first. So there are 39 general categories of, again, general categories. And if you know the rabbis by now, every category will have lots of subcategories. So the list of things that you actually are not allowed to do on Shabbat is way longer than 39. The 39 general categories of labor that they are forbidden on Shabbat. Okay, each of these categories include a range of derivative laws and activities, some of which are described in the Shabbat laws. Now, the code of Jewish law will have a category, a chapter called the Shabbat laws. The melachot are generally divided into 6 groups, classified according to the mishkans, that is the tabernacles, activities with which they are associated. So let's see which they are. Number 1, field work. Okay, so you go to the Torah, you read some of the things that it has to be done for the tabernacle or around the tabernacle. The rabbis came out with this list of forbidden tasks on Shabbat. Okay, category number 1, field work. Sowing, forbidden. Plowing, reaping, gathering and binding. And you see, from here we learn, for example, that you are not allowed to tie a knot on Shabbat. But it will be a subcategory of gathering and binding. And you can understand how the subcategories or derivatives, as they said, work. Okay, threshing, winnowing, selecting, grinding, sifting, kneading, and baking. That's why we do everything in advance, before Shabbat. And on Shabbat, we are not allowed to cook or do anything in the kitchen. Everything has to be done before Shabbat. And there is something very interesting. I don't know if you ever noticed, for observant Jews, they sometimes have what is called the Shabbat plate. That is like a warmer. You can have food that you prepare before Shabbat, usually the cholent for example, which is a delicious mixture of beans and meat and gravy all together. So it's in a big pot, and it's in a warmer that it was turned on before Shabbat, and it will remain on for 25 hours. You don't shut it until the end of Shabbat. It will keep that cholent warm. You can put it there. But there is a trick and a restriction. If you take the pot out of there, you cannot put it in another surface. So you will notice, or maybe you haven't noticed, and so I will tell you. You take the pot out of the warmer, and you go around the table, right? People will serve from there to their plate, and then without putting it down, you put it back on the warmer. That's the correct way of doing it. So because you didn't put it anywhere else, halachically, I mean, according to Jewish law, that pot never left the warmer. And by the way, this same rationale is being used to try to figure out how an astronaut will have to observe Shabbat and other holidays in the moon, for example. And the rabbis use the fact that because, they wear the suit, they are never, it's like they're still connected to planet Earth because they're in a bubble. So it's like they were trying to use, it's the same case of the pot that never left the warmer. So that's why the astronaut, even though it's in the moon, continues to observe the holidays the way they are observed on planet Earth. But if for some reason the astronaut can leave that suit behind, then he has to start observing the cycles of the moon, which it will make it very complicated to observe Judaism, by the way. Okay? But that's a fascinating topic, but it's a different topic. So this is the first category of the 6. Number 1, working with fabrics. That is mostly figured out with the working with the curtains made of fabric. Okay, and then it was expanded to working with any fabrics. Let's see. Shelly Chachinov, he said, what if you take your plate to the stove? Or is that carrying? No, you can take to the stove and then you put from there. That's fine. But if you take the pot out of the warmer, you cannot put it down anywhere else. Otherwise, it's a violation of the laws of Shabbat. Or actually, it's not a violation. You cannot put it back in the warmer. That's what it is. Caroline Louis Smith, you said the man should plan ahead how much wood he needs. Was it? Yeah. Exactly, but not just wood, everything. Before Shabbat, you have to plan ahead everything that you're going to need because you cannot make anything fresh on Shabbat. And Karim Farkas says, are these the laws that decide how instant coffee is made in already hot water? Yeah, and because the instant coffee is already, quote unquote, cooked, was already cooked in advance. It's different from fresh coffee that the water has to cook it. That's why it's instant. You don't have to cook it. It's already made. So it's a different process. That's why we can use instant coffee on Shabbat. But and the water, of course, is already preheated before Shabbat, and it stays always on a device that keeps it warm. So what we learn that we can or cannot do with fabrics. We cannot shearing wool, cleaning, combing, dyeing, spinning, stretching the threads, making loops, weaving threads, separating the threads, tying a knot, untying a knot, sewing and tearing. So one of the things that you have to be careful on Shabbat is not start playing with the tzitzit, which I'm pretty sure everybody did. If you start playing with the tzitzit, then you may be stretching the thread, you may be separating the threads if they're entangled, and that's forbidden on Shabbat, so you have to be very careful with that. And about also, you cannot make, if you wear a tie, you have to be very careful to make the knot before Shabbat, and you have to kind of make it loose, take it out of your head, and then you put it, and then you close it. You cannot make the knot of the tie on Shabbat. It's a melacha. It's melacha. Shelly Chachin, what about tea? Same thing. You can do it. Next. Working with leather. It's also because there were some curtains that were made of leathers, and the walls were leather in the tabernacle. So the forbidden tasks are trapping, slaughtering, skinning, tanning hide, soothing, ruling lines, and cuttings. Number 4 and number 5 related to making the beams of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. And from here, they learn writing and erasing because of the carving and things. So, long story short, we learn from there that it's forbidden to write and to erase. Okay? Clyde, what is your question? Do you have a question, Clyde? I don't see any question from you. You're asking if your question didn't appear, but I don't see any question. That's strange. Let's see if you can repeat it. Maybe it's a word that YouTube doesn't like in your question and it's filtering. I don't know. Now, category number 5, the putting up and taking down the Mishkan. So from here we learn 2 prohibitions, building and demolishing. And number 6, the Mishkan's final touches. We learn that is forbidden, extinguishing a fire, kindling a fire, striking the final hammer blow, and carrying. Clyde. Clyde, you said an appliance would cycle on and off. Even though the appliance is left on, I'm not sure why this isn't a problem. Well, there are in this day appliances that they have Sabbath mode, that they do something like that. They do something like that. But I have so many restrictions, I can't remember all of them. One of them is, for example, the temperature. It has to be always keeping the mixture below the point of boiling. You're not allowed to make things boil during Shabbat. But I do have, my appliances have Shabbat mode, for example. And you can program timers and things, which is very interesting. But I don't know all the details. It's very complicated, and that's why there are books and books and books about the understanding and all the implications of all the melachot of Shabbat. Okay? And if you wanted to make it even more complicated, then we have an extra category that is mukse. I like the word, mukse. And I learned this in the bad way when I was invited to a Shabbat dinner. And I remember that it was in Chile, and I had a white shirt with a little pocket here. And inside, I had a subway ticket. It's not that I was going to, I don't know why I had it there, and you can see it because it was, I guess, a little bit translucent. And somebody looked at me like this, said, Muksa, Muksa. I said, what the heck is Muksa? And then that's why I learned all the things. So Muksa, long story short, I will read it for here. There's things that they're set aside. Refers to items that may not be moved or handled on Shabbat, the Jewish day of rest. So it's things that even though you don't use it to violate the Shabbat, it's still forbidden to have it with you because it could be used to violate Shabbat. Okay? So it's a stringency. It's a just in case thing, the muksa. So that's why somebody didn't like that it was there, because even though I wasn't going to take the subway, the ticket is used to take the subway and makes it muksa. Ta-da! What did I know? So, muksa. So one of the most famous Shabbat-related rabbinical injunctions, muksa, was instituted to preserve the state of restfulness this sacred day. When? In the year 335 BCE. Okay? It was all these stringencies were imposed. And that was, listen to the story, to strengthen the observance of Shabbat in the land of Israel, Nehemiah and his colleagues instituted that any object not needed for Shabbat use may not be handled on that day. So, in other words, everything that you don't really need on Shabbat for the Shabbat observance or Shabbat pleasure is forbidden. Okay? And this actually, 335 BCE, that was 14 years after the rebuild of the temple. It looks like people were very relaxed, let's put it that way, on the Shabbat observance. So they needed all these stringencies to bring them back. So when Shabbat observance improved, they eased the restrictions somewhat and allow additional categories of objects to be handled, as well as additional methods of handling. and the resulting set of law remains in effect today. So again, there is another list that you have to be aware of, but let me give you a few examples. Okay, for example, a pen. Can you fidget with a pen on Shabbat? Technically, yes, because you're not allowed to use a pen to write. But because the main usage of a pen is writing, then you're not allowed to touch it. It's muksa. You understand? You understand how it works? Can you count money on Shabbat? Well, counting the money is not a problem as far as you don't use the money. But money is used to pay, right? To buy things, which it's forbidden on Shabbat. So touching the money is forbidden because money is muksa on Shabbat. So forth. So that's what you have to know about muksa. Okay? And that's what I wanted to teach today for all of you. I hope you are very prepared to come to synagogue on Saturdays and to understand what's going on. And I hope you learn a little bit more about Shabbat HaChodesh, about our calendar, and about Shabbat itself. Very important things in Judaism. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for this edition of Torah L'Chaim. Remember, the class is going to be rebroadcasted at 8 p.m. Central Time tonight. And God willing, we are going to meet again next Thursday to study already about Passover. I always like to take the last 2 Thursdays before Pesach to help my students, you, to be better prepared for that important holiday. So invite your friends, because next Thursday we're going to start preparing ourselves for Pesach, and we are going to, and I think 2 weeks from now, I wanted to go through the Haggadah and to review all the songs, all the music of the Haggadah with all of you. So remember, we have a date next 2 Thursday. Thank you so much for being there. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe. Hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.